Tenakoto katoa. Welcome back to the Youth Factor, where we aim to see the world through the lens of the future. I'm your host, Alex Jung, and I hope to take you on a virtual journey around the world where stories untold will be shared, current issues will be discussed, and the voices of the youth will be heard. Today, we explore a special administrative region. This region is a vibrant, cosmopolitan city that is renowned for its unique blend of Eastern and Western cultures. With stunning skylines and impressive architectural design, this city is also famous for its bustling street markets, where you can find anything from traditional Chinese herbal remedies to the latest electronic gadgets. This city has amazing food, including street food to Michelin-starred restaurants. There are also beautiful beaches, hiking trails, and parks, while having amazing shopping malls. This city is also a crucial location for international business and finance. An efficient transport system also makes it a desirable place to live and work. Today, we explore Hong Kong. And joining me today is our guest host, Lois Leung. She's interested in the arts, international relations, politics, and participating in social services. Lois is currently studying at United World College's Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Welcome, Lois.
Hello, I'm Lois. And no, Lois is not my ID card name, but I've been going by Lois my entire life, so I'm sticking with it now. And quite frankly, literally nobody in my current school could manage to pronounce my Chinese name correctly, so
Oh,
that's a little bit of a cultural shock, but it's fine. And I'm officially 18, happily legal.
mhm.
I'm really excited to get my consumption voucher. It's literally the Hong Kong government giving Hong Kong citizens age 18 money. So I'm
Mm.
really excited about that. It's my first time getting it. And I'm from this little neighborhood called Mao Shan, which in Chinese means Saddle Mountain because
Mm.
it's a mountain.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the mountain looks like a saddle.
Mm.
And it's in one of the three regions called New Territories in Hong Kong. New Territories, New Territories is a little bit invisible in the cosmopolitan city because it's more of a nature part.
Mm.
But precisely because of that, I would like to point out that Hong Kong is so much more than just the skyscrapers and fancy old streets that you see in the movies. A lot of it is actually covered by mountains and oceans. And before Hong Kong was developed, Hong Kong was literally just a farming area and a fishing village.
Mm.
And yeah, if you visit Hong Kong, you can try going to the nature park. You can go hiking in Cape de Guela,
Mm.
and it's a really nice place. I've visited that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I've lived in Hong Kong for the past year, and honestly, as much as there's amazing malls and shopping centers and all those fancy skyscrapers you can see in the island, the place where I stay is also in the New Territories, and the nature is astonishing.
Mm.
There's amazing
Oh,
beach,
it is.
amazing hiking trails, and I think that's kind of the side of Hong Kong that not many people know about, but
Exactly.
good to bring it up. So I'm very honored to have you on the podcast, and we'll begin with discussing the first issue, which is Hong Kong's local education system. So the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education, or HKDSC, is an examination organized by the Hong Kong Examinations and Assessment Authority. It's also the national curriculum for Hong Kong secondary students. The HKDSC is designed to prepare students for further education and employment. However, there have been several criticisms of this. Let's begin by talking about the stress and pressure students face. What do you think makes the HKDSC in particular a higher stress-inducing curriculum? And what is the current stigma about getting into top universities? Is well-being being considered for the students?
Okay, so before I went to UWC, I was also a Hong Kong DSE student, so I have a lot to say about it. The thing is, stress is the major criticism of the HKDSE, but I'll begin by explaining what HKDSE actually is. So basically, like the IB and IGCSE and many other education curricula, DSE has an is actually the final public examination that grade 12 students take, and their grades from this exam would determine whether or not or where they would enter university after secondary school. So the thing is, the major criticism of Hong Kong DSE is that unlike the IB, DSE is an we call it an one exam determining your life and death exam, meaning
Mhm.
that only the final DSE exam that students take in May will be reflected in their diploma score. So basically, in the IB, you have internal assessments for every subject, and you might have more than one internal assessments for every subject. But the thing is, in DSE, less than half of the subjects that you take would have internal assessments that we call SBA, school-based exams. So basically, So basically, you train for DSE for 3 years. But the thing is, if you have a bad day on the day of your exam, or if you're just sick, then all 3 years of work would go in vain, and you would
Mm,
have to take another route to enter university, which is called, we call it a SO. It's like another diploma that you get, but it's not a degree. And then once you finish that diploma, you might have a shot at re-entering university, but you have to pay all the fees by yourself. And that's not something that everyone can afford.
mm,
So knowing that you only have one shot at entering university, no matter how much effort you put in the past 3 years, that induces a lot of stress in term two in grade 12 for a lot of students. So
mm,
that's a systematic part. But the thing is, I feel like the problem with stress in Hong Kong education is more of a cultural problem because, culturally speaking, people in Hong Kong, well, Asians in general, have they place their validations in academics. It's reflected in a lot of families. So basically, I have a lot of friends whose parents pressured them a lot into getting good grades, into becoming professionals, like becoming medical doctors, becoming engineers, becoming lawyers.
mm,
So students get their stress from their family, from themselves, from society that, okay, because like the Hong Kong society is very elitist,
mm.
and other jobs other than professional jobs or white collar jobs are very looked down upon. So students have this cultural pressure to perform well in exam to get into university, but not because that's precisely what they want, but that's what's expected of them.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that you make a good point about the kind of Asian stigma about grades and academic um, achievement. And I think that that is the leading cause for stress. And when you have a curriculum like the Hong Kong one, where it all depends on one exam, that stress just piles up exponentially.
Exactly.
So I think that's already the curriculum and the cultural kind of views of Hong Kong are not compatible with each other immediately. So
Mhm.
another issue is that HKDSE requires students to take a fixed set of subjects. So this has been criticized for not allowing students to pursue their individual interests and talents. So do you think students are particularly dissatisfied with the lack of freedom of deciding what students want to pursue?
Um, okay, so the Hong Kong DSE requires students to take four mandatory subjects:
Mhm.
Chinese, English, mathematics, and formerly liberal studies. And now it's been replaced by a subject called citizenship and social development. Okay, there's another controversy regarding
Yeah,
the new subject, citizenship and social development. And a lot of people call it a propaganda subject. But again, that's another topic.
yeah.
Yeah, anyway, I would say the problem with the lack of freedom, again, is not so much a systematic one, but a cultural one, because when we look at the official website for DSE and the subject list provided by the Hong Kong Exam Authority, we can see that there's actually a huge variety of subjects being provided, from traditional ones like literature, history, sciences, to visual arts, music, ethics, and religion studies, and to more creative and more non-conventional subjects like fashion, image design, jewelry design, and digital age, but they're called applied learning subjects. But the thing is, the reason why we don't see schools, or at least conventional schools, offering them is because of the lack of interest and the lack of teachers. So basically, that's the lack of demand and the lack of supply.
Right.
So we don't see it, but the thing is, they exist. We just don't use the resources. Because,
Hmm.
like, there's a systematic flaw in it, which is how the non-conventional applied learning subjects um only have 3 grades, with their highest grade equals to a grade 4 or higher in the official Hong Kong DSE grade. Keep in mind that in DSE there are 7 grades, from 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 5. There's 5 star, and there's 5 star star, and a 4 really isn't enough to get into a top university. So the thing is, a lot of students just decide not to take them, and a lot of schools just decide not to offer them because they want students' grades to be higher so the school's reputation would be better, and also there's not enough demand for the course to be held. But the thing is, again, it's more of a cultural problem because, again, in Hong Kong, the traditional culture puts top careers like medicine, law, and engineer on a pedestal. And that manifests itself into pressures from relative society and students themselves to pursue only the traditional subjects, and especially the science subjects, which is physics, chemistry, and biology. And they're called the good subjects that smart people take in my community.
Right.
So the thing is, these, like, there's a huge variety of subjects available for students to take. It's just that the culture in Hong Kong and also Hong Kong's economy, which focuses on finances, business, sometimes tourism, but mainly finances and businesses, don't allow space for people equipped with non-conventional skills to enter society and to use their skills to contribute to society. Hence, the lack of demand and the lack of supply for more diverse subject choices. And yeah.
So moving back to the kind of idea of stress. So the grading is extremely harsh in this curriculum. You just kind of outlined how it works, but it says that almost half of the students fail each year. So if half of students fail, what revisions to this curriculum need to be made? Because this is a concerning statistic. Is this curriculum an example of the elitist Hong Kong education system?
Oh yeah. I mean, yes, half of the students fail each year, which is again really concerning. Like obviously the simplest way is to make the exams easier, but of course we wouldn't do that because that would entirely defeat the very purpose of holding an exam. But the thing is, I feel like instead of focusing on a change within the curriculum and a systematic change, the most important thing and also the most difficult change that we should make in general would be the change in the general belief that the Hong Kong DSE and universities are the only successful path for Hong Kong students. Because one of the problems why students fail to or why students are not motivated to learn in local public schools is because of the lack of choices and the lack of diversity and the lack of options in the Hong Kong society for students with different interests, different passions, different skills. Like for example, people interested in music, people interested in art, people interested in design to thrive. So they just lack the motivation. And the reason why they don't have the motivation and why they're discouraged is because of the cultural belief that only those top subjects and top careers are worth it. So yeah. And also to change that, we need more diverse career opportunities that are implemented and promoted in Hong Kong. Because like in the end, you study to prepare for a future, but within the curriculum, we can continue to add the diversity, but make every subject equal. Because if you remember, I was talking about the applied learning subjects earlier and how they only have 3 grades and the higher grade only is equivalent to grade 4. If we make every subject equal and make all the gradings equal, the students would be more encouraged to take different subjects and try different opportunities. And if they have the interest in the subject, of course, they would be motivated to learn that themselves. So yeah.
So according to a recent survey by the Hong Kong Federation of Youth Groups, 51.9% of the 3,669 secondary school students interviewed had shown emotional symptoms of depression. Is this being acknowledged by the Education Bureau? And have there been any changes?
This is, again, very concerning. And I also know a lot of my friends who have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and that's really concerning. And I would say it kind of has been acknowledged by the Education Bureau, but the responses are very lacking. So basically, in 2017, the Education Bureau implemented a policy that requires every primary school to get 1 social worker and every secondary school to get 2 social workers. And social workers' roles in schools are usually to talk with students, to hold these therapy sessions with students that they think are facing emotional problems, either because of academics or other reasons. But the thing is, it's really not enough because, again, the root cause of the depression is the stress, which has a systematic problem and a cultural problem. And without tackling these two root causes, no matter how many social workers you put in schools, it wouldn't be enough because it wouldn't, like the stress would still be piling and piling and piling, and you're just tackling the aftermath of their problem. And honestly, two social workers isn't enough because I was in a public school before I went to UWC, and my school has two social workers, but they are very, very overworked. And if you want to book an appointment with a social worker, you would have to line up. And that just shows how severe the problem of emotional stress, emotional anxiety is in Hong Kong.
Mm.
So
Yeah. So now let's talk about the direct subsidy scheme. So could you please explain how it works, what it is, and why this is a beneficial system, and if there's any limitations to it for education?
So the direct subsidy scheme is a little amendment in the local public education system. It was introduced in 1991. That was before Hong Kong was handed over to China, but they kept it afterwards. So basically, direct subsidy scheme schools are called semi-private schools. I call it semi-private schools. The aim of it is to inject diversity into the local education by allowing some independence and autonomy for schools in setting fees, in setting their own curriculums, and in selecting their students. So basically, the schools that enter the scheme would receive government subsidy for every student enrolled, but they are still allowed to collect fees from the students, which is not allowed in local public schools. Obviously, the fees they collect would be much less than international schools, which are completely independent, but they would still cost a bit. So, for example, I did a little bit of research. Heian School's annual school fee for each student is 33,000 Hong Kong dollars per year. And then St. Paul Co-Education College's fee is 61,000 Hong Kong dollars for each year for secondary school classes, and 91,500 for international, for IB diploma program classes, which would be in high school, which is still a lot.
Mm.
But the thing is, precisely because they collect fees from students, they would have more resources to providing additional support services and facilities, such as they built swimming pools and they have a lot of exchange opportunities, local exchange opportunities, overseas exchange opportunities. And also one really big difference between these semi-private schools and public schools is that a lot of these semi-private schools offer more than just the DSE curriculum. So for example, in St. Paul Education College, St. Paul Co-Education College, in the first 3 grades of secondary school, everybody follows the local curriculum-ish, which is DSE. And then in high school, half of the students still continue to follow the DSE curriculum, but the other half does the IB. So 1 year free IB and then 2 years of IBDP. Some other schools do A levels, for example, DGS. Yes.
Right.
So that's the main difference. And then, yeah.
So there's also a large group of Hong Kong Indians and Pakistanis and other ethnic groups residing in Hong Kong. So how do you think the HKDSC or other curriculum forms have key limitations for those who are not actually Hong Kong locals or residents?
Mainly it's the Chinese course.
Mm.
Because again, in DSE, you have 4 mandatory subjects: Chinese, English, mathematics, and formerly liberal studies. Because like in Hong Kong, we mainly speak Chinese. So the Chinese course is set at a native language level, which is really hard because you have to study not only the modern Chinese, but also the ancient Chinese forms, which is really different from modern Chinese. And without any translations, I wouldn't be able to understand it unless I studied it very in depth. So imagine when ancient Chinese is already really challenging for locals, which it is, for people that are not ethnically Chinese, that would be even more difficult. It's like with IB, you have language A and language B. In DSE, Chinese is more of a language A level, and then English is more language B level. But the thing is, in IB, you can choose which language you want to do for language A and which language you want to do for language B. And in DSE, you don't have a choice. So if you take the DSE as someone who's not ethnically Chinese, you're at a disadvantage because your Chinese level is just not good enough to take the DSE. But you're competing with people who are speaking native Chinese, whose parents are Chinese, whose grandparents are Chinese, and who can have the Chinese support even at home, not just at school. So that's a really big limitation. And also, you can argue that in some university grants committee funded universities, which is the major 8 universities in Hong Kong, alternative Chinese results, qualification, for example, GCSE Chinese qualification is allowed. But the thing is, there's systematically speaking, there's no clear guidelines on the conversion of this alternative Chinese exam qualification to the DSE scores. Like, for example, you can score full scores for GCSE Chinese exam, but you wouldn't know you wouldn't know what grade you would get in terms of a DSE result. So you wouldn't know what courses or what university you can actually apply to, because Hong Kong universities take your exam results into very, very heavy consideration, unlike some other American universities. So that's mainly what the limitations are.
So the IB, or the International Baccalaureate, is another form of curriculum that is known for its academic rigor and difficulty. So how does this contrast with HKDSE though? And what are the key differences that make the IB perhaps less challenging for mental well-being?
Okay, I wouldn't say it's less challenging for mental well-being, because IBs is also very challenging for mental well-being. But okay, content-wise, IB's easier. Math, it's easier. Okay, there are 4 levels of math in IB. But in DSE, there's 3 math courses. There's 1 mandatory math course, which I took. And then there's M1 and M2, which are more of a higher level math. And you can take it as an elective, not as a mandatory subject. And then when you compare IB math to DSE math, the mandatory DSE math course is more difficult than AI and AESL, but less difficult than AAHL.
Right.
But then M1 and M2 are harder than AEHL. And then when you compare the course ESS and geography, I don't know about IB geography because my school doesn't offer it. ESS touches on some topics that we discuss in geography in DSE, but in less depth. So content-wise, IB is easier. And I would say all subjects in DSE are equivalent to HLs and IB. So basically, most people take 6 subjects in DSE, so you're taking 6 HLs. So again, content-wise is easier. But workload-wise, IB is heavier because every subject has IAs. And in DSE, you're mostly just doing past paper trainings to revise for exams. Sorry. So yeah. And also for the mental well-being part, I feel like it really depends, because it really depends on the school. It really depends on the teacher's teaching approach. It really depends on the learning environment and your personal goals. So in my own experience, UWC or IB, okay, my IB experience was less challenging for mental well-being, but that's just because I have the academic foundation from my previous DSE experience. And also, I like how classes are more interactive and less exam focused. And also, my school generally strives to develop an environment where students don't study out of fear, but out of fear of failure, but out of curiosity. But the thing is, IB schools can also be spoon feeding. IB schools can also be very academically stressful.
Mm.
So I feel like if we're gonna compare well-being, you should compare how IB students view academics and DSE students view academics. And
Mm.
that's also about the cultural differences.
Mm.
So I would say it really depends on yourself.
Mm. So you mentioned elitism multiple times, and this is also a really big core issue in Hong Kong. So could you start off by talking about the wealth gap in Hong Kong and how this severely affects the quality of education?
Hong Kong has a really big wealth gap.
Mm.
So again, I did a little research. Hong Kong's Gini index in pre-COVID times, which is in 2016, is 0.473, which is still higher than 0.4, the standard for Gini index. And it's because of the extremely low tax rate. So basically, the highest tax rate in Hong Kong is 17%, which is far, far, far less than most Western societies.
Mm.
And the thing is, again, I feel like elitism in education is not so much because of the wealth gap, but because of the education system. Because in Hong Kong, again, there's public school, there's semi-private school, and there's international school.
Yeah.
Unless there are any drastic self-motivating changes, your social status is set in your family's background. And it's really hard for you to climb into the social ladder if you're born into a less privileged family background.
Mm.
And if you have more money, you just enter international schools, you enter DSS, direct subsidy scheme schools, because they have more resources and they have better equipped teachers to equip you better to get your high grade, to get into university, and to train you to become a leader in your future in society.
Mm.
But there's also the thing about extra tuition classes, which is really, really, really common in Hong Kong and
Mm.
in a lot of Asian societies. It's really common and it's concerning to a point where when you just walk on the streets, when you just see buses passing by, you see huge, huge tuition class ads covering the buses, which is really concerning because the thing is, these tuition classes should be extra. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
something that you have to take. But the thing is, in Hong Kong, everybody takes it. And
Mm.
in tuition classes, they teach you mainly exam skills rather than knowledge of the subject. But then in DSE, having exam skills is more important than actual knowledge about the subject, which
Mm.
has been proven from personal experience.
Mm.
So the thing is, if you don't have access to tuition classes, you're automatically at a disadvantage.
Right.
And a lot of students in Hong Kong take tuition classes for every single subject, and
Mm.
that's 6 to 7 subjects.
Mm.
But the thing is, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
The average cost would be like 200 to 300 Hong Kong dollars per class. And
Mm.
usually people would take one class per week. So that's 1,200 Hong Kong dollars
Mm.
per month. And that times 6. And not every family can afford it.
Yeah.
So even if you're not in a semi-private school,
Mm.
you still catch up your grades with these tuition classes. But that depends on your family's financial background. So the thing is, elitism really, again, elitism leads to a systematic flaw and leads to a cultural flaw, and both result in people not being able, or it not being easy for people to climb up the social ladder in the future, which is really ironic because education and exams are supposed to be this fair method for people from different backgrounds to climb up the social ladder with your own ability.
Mm.
But elitism and the systematic flow hinders that.
Yeah, so definitely it seems that education is influenced by both culture and the kind of economical status that people have in the country, which, like you said, is very
Mm,
ironic and also affects the quality of education. So I'm going to talk a bit about the immigration wave and the Hong Kong protests, kind of as one topic. So the 2019 Hong Kong protests and the now infamous national security law caused a large migration wave for those Hong Kong residents leaving to countries such as UK, Australia, and Canada. So could you begin by contextualizing the 2019 Hong Kong protests?
yes. So to understand the 2019 Hong Kong protests, you first have to understand the political system of Hong Kong and the history of Hong Kong. So
Mm,
Hong Kong was a colony of Britain
mm,
for 99 years, more than 19 years up till 1997, which is really recent. And Hong Kong was handed over to China in 1997 on the agreement that Hong Kong would remain as a special and administrative region of China
mm,
for 50 years. And Hong Kong would be ruled under the one country, two system. So basically, one country, as in China, one country. So Hong Kong is in China. Hong Kong is a part of China. And
mm,
two systems, as in Hong Kong continue to run on the capitalist Western system, economically speaking, politically speaking, and then China just continue being communist. Whether
mm,
or not China is communist is up to debate,
mm,
but we cannot deny that Hong Kong and China run on different system. So basically, Hong Kong has our own government run by Hong Kong people. We
mm,
have our own sets of laws, which China is not supposed to interfere with, legally speaking. We
mm,
have our own flag, we have our own currency, we have our own education system, and everything else except for international diplomacy and military, which
mm,
is provided by China. So
mm,
that's the historical part of Hong Kong. But then in 2019, the former chief executive, which is equivalent to the leader of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong government, tried to introduce something called the extradition bill.
mm,
So, in case you don't know, the extradition bill is something that a lot of countries have with each other. So
mm,
basically, say US and Canada,
mm,
if they have the extradition bill, and if a US citizen uh, went against the law in Canada, and
mm,
then he fled to US,
mm,
and the Canadian authorities want to arrest him, the US government is allowed to extradite this US person, this American person, to Canada to face judgment in Canada and to be imprisoned in Canada.
mm,
That's how the extradition bill works. So Carrie Lam, the former chief executive, tried to introduce the extradition bill between Hong Kong and China because previously there wasn't any extradition bill between Hong Kong and China. But that sparked a really huge wave of opposition
mm.
and protests because Hong Kong people generally don't believe in the judicial systems in China because we run on different judicial systems.
Right.
So Hong Kong follows the innocent until proven
Mm,
approach.
yeah.
China, the opposite,
Mm,
convicted until proven innocent.
mm,
So the fact that we run on different systems makes us doubt the Chinese judicial system. And
mm,
there's still a lot of corruption in the Chinese judicial system. And we wouldn't want us to be sent back there. And also, a lot of Hong Kong people fear that the Chinese government would use this extradition bill
mm,
to request of the Hong Kong government to send political opposition dissidents back to China to face their own judgment, which wouldn't be fair because technically we should run on different systems and Hong Kong should follow democracy.
mm,
So on 9th of June 2019, there was the first large scale protest in the
mm,
Victoria Park in Causeway Bay in Hong Kong. And the Hong Kong government didn't listen and continued to try to push the extradition bill to be legalized. So 3 days later, 12th of June, the second large-scale protest with over 2 million people, and take into consideration that Hong Kong has 7 million people. So
Right.
basically, more than 1/4 people went out onto the streets in this one small park, and also the entire area. And the government still did not pull out the extradition bill. So citywide protests happened and violence erupted. So a lot of protesters clashed with police. A lot of police brutality happened. And then because there still wasn't any ideal responses from the government, so the entire protest movement changed from just against the extradition bill to against police brutality. And it extends to voice out the 2014 umbrella movement,
Right.
which is to push for full democracy, to push to allow Hong Kong people to vote for our chief executive. And then it also extends to other struggles that people in Hong Kong face, for example, social problems like housing crisis and also the failure in the education system that we just talked about. That went on for a few months and actually a year. And then up till COVID rules were introduced by the government and the protests just died down gradually. And then the national security law happened in June 2020, which is a year after the protests happened.
Right.
And everything just completely died down.
So how did this have an impact on your life then and your community?
It actually changed everything for me, like for me personally, because I started noticing or being interested in politics so much more after the protests, because that was like a little spark for me. And then now I'm really passionate about fighting against other social problems, not just political problems. But then during the protests, it was really such a mess because schools were suspended. I remember not going to school for around a week during the heat of the protests. And then there were people that I knew personally that went out onto the streets, and everybody was really worried about them. And then there were people that I know personally who got arrested, thankfully not in jail now, but they got arrested, and then we saw the pictures, everybody was scared and stuff. And then there were activism activities at school, my school, other schools, and then there was a lot of tension everywhere. Okay, regarding the activism activities at school, because there were different schools with different ideologies, with different approaches to politics. There were schools that were supportive of students' activism. There were schools that tried to take the neutral side. They would allow students to do activism activities at school, but that wouldn't be representing the school. That would represent the students of the school, because the school doesn't want to face any threats from the government if they got into trouble. And then there were schools that really took the government side, and they really banned all the activism activities at school. And for example, there was this school that torn down the school's debate teams, both Chinese debate and English debate. And the students that were formerly in the debate team had to apply for competitions as themselves, but not representing the school. And that was a really big shock to me, because debating isn't political. It's about exchanging opinions. The topics doesn't have to be political, but the schools were just too scared of what might happen, and they would just take everything to the extreme level and ban all the political activism at school. And there's also a lot of tension and fractures within families. A lot of young people would be arguing with their parents, and parents wouldn't allow young people to go out. And I remember reading a lot of articles about young people being kicked out of their families just because they were participating in protests, and there were different charities founded to fund these young people to
Mm,
seek accommodation, to get food. So yeah. And there
mm,
were also university campuses turning into battle zones.
right.
The Polytechnics University and Chinese University of Hong Kong.
Mm,
So it was a lot of mess.
mm. So, as a result of this, the number of people immigrating is increasing, many that are students and professionals. So, how will this slow down development in Hong Kong over the next 10 to 20 years?
So it's a really big problem.
Mm,
And like again, according to research, around 28,000 Hong Kong students left last year alone.
mm,
And there have been 144,500 people immigrated to the UK within 2 years only. So the thing is, when we talk about slowing down development in Hong Kong, it's not just because of the immigration wave. So Hong Kong faces three problems regarding population: the immigration wave, the low birth rate, and the aging population.
mm,
And then for the immigration wave, only people that have certain privileges financially would be able to immigrate elsewhere, because usually people would go to the UK and go to Canada. And then if you go to the UK, you would have to stay there for 5 years as
mm.
non-permanent residents
Right.
to be able to apply for a UK citizenship. So essentially, you wouldn't have any social benefits. You wouldn't have free healthcare. You wouldn't have free education. You would have to pay these expensive university tuitions. And then
Mm,
for Canada, there are two streams. Stream A, which is studying university in Canada and then applying for a permanent residency, or having a university degree and then going to Canada to work for 1 year and then applying for the permanent residency. Both ways you have to pay. You have to pay for university tuition fee, and you have to pay for tickets, and you have to pay for accommodation, healthcare, and everything if you decide to go work there. So now that only people that are sort of privileged have the privilege to immigrate elsewhere, they bring their expertise and wealth overseas.
mm,
And there's been so many research being conducted regarding how much money Hong Kong actually is losing. So the Bank of America predicted the capital outflow reaching as much as 280 billion Hong Kong dollars, which
wow.
is 36 billion US dollars in
Mm,
2021 alone,
mm,
which is the first year of the immigration wave. And now it's been 2 years. So imagine that tripling.
yeah.
So that creates an instant vacuum in the money revenue in Hong Kong and
Mm,
also the expertise in the labor market. And that's been waiting to be filled up. But the thing is, people are continuing to leaving, so the vacuum would become bigger and bigger. And then
right.
for the low birth rate, it's an existing problem, but it's also a result of the immigration wave, because people that immigrate are usually families. It's like, for example, two-thirds of the people immigrating to the UK are underage. They
Mm,
are people taken by parents to study in the UK because
mm,
they don't believe in the Hong Kong education system and they want their children to live a better life with more freedom.
mm.
And then imagine those people having babies elsewhere. Those babies would have been born in Hong Kong, but now they're not born in Hong Kong. They're born in the UK, they're born in Canada, they're born in Australia.
Mm,
And low birth rate, it's also due to typical problems faced by developed cities, such as high cost, rising female status, low marriage rates. But
mm,
there's also the issue of the political turmoil in the past 2 years. When you don't believe in the future of your city, why would you bring a new life? into
Mm,
the city when you
mm,
can't handle yourself already. So that also leads to the low birth rate. And then aging population is another topic, but it basically puts extra pressure on the labor market and government revenue. And then we can see the impact of these three problems Hong Kong faces regarding population in education.
mm,
So there are less pupils, and which that can already be seen now. And that leads to the threat of the closure of schools. And
mm.
for now, at least 5 schools face closure in the upcoming years.
Wow.
And yeah, and again, it's not just about the schools closing, it's about jobs being lost. It's about less local, capable people with expertise being available in the long term, affecting the labor market, affecting the public revenue of Hong Kong. And then economically speaking, people leaving Hong Kong with their wealth. So they're taking the money from Hong Kong, moving to elsewhere. And it creates a really bad hit to government revenue. And there will be less resources for social benefits
Mm,
amid the aging population when there are more people that will be retired that will need the social benefits from the government. And then there's also the problem about international companies pulling out of Hong Kong.
mm,
So according to CNN, nearly half of the European businesses in Hong Kong are considering relocating.
wow.
Half,
Yeah.
half.
Mm,
That's a lot. And among the firms planning to leave, 25% said they would fully relocate out of Hong Kong,
mm,
and then 24% to relocate at least partially.
mm,
So the thing is, Hong Kong got its fame from not just our interesting mix of culture, but also being one of the best financial hubs in Asia. That's disappearing. That's
mm,
really disappearing. And then in the long term, unless there are any drastic changes in terms of politics and economy, our tradings would suffer. And that also leads to less government revenue, less money to develop Hong Kong, less money for the people. And the thing is, the Hong Kong government does know this problem.
mm,
And chief executive, current chief executive, recently introduced the talent attraction scheme.
mm,
It's called talent attraction scheme. So it works by allowing more people to enter Hong Kong to work with less restrictions. For example, uh, you don't have to have a secured job offer to apply for a working visa in Hong Kong for 2 years. But the thing is, it's really not tackling the root problem, which is the political change, which
mm,
is in Hong Kong. It's only tackling the external service area problems. And even if you introduce people to Hong Kong, they wouldn't have the local expertise because they wouldn't have to take the local examinations. So the people that are trying to fill in the vacuum that I just mentioned wouldn't be the same people, and Hong Kong wouldn't be the same again, economically speaking, politically speaking, socially speaking.
mm. So yeah, I think you established that these protests are such a pivotal kind of event that has changed the course of how Hong Kong operates. I mean, you talk about the fact that so many young people are leaving Hong Kong to go to other places, and that's going to cause like a large amount of slowing down of the economy. You talk about the aging population that's also affecting the government revenue. And also the really big point is that lots of big businesses that make Hong Kong the place it really is and the financial reputation it has, all of that is vanishing now because there's companies just leaving Hong Kong because of these protests. So actually these protests have a lot of implications that have to be considered. So states such as the UK are also now creating immigration schemes to attract Hong Kong residents. So, to what extent does this mass immigration movement actually benefit foreign powers and states?
I feel like it's a mutually beneficial
Mm,
um thing. Because like when we look at the countries that are creating immigration schemes to attract Hong Kong people, it's UK and Canada. And
mm,
these two countries face serious labor shortages, UK because of Brexit and
Yeah.
other reasons, and in Canada because of their own problems. So the thing is, it benefits Hong Kong people by allowing simpler ways for people in Hong Kong that have expertise to immigrate to these countries to fill in their vacuums. And the thing is, the people that they attract are not just anyone. So, for example, in Canada, I explained a little bit of their immigration scheme, but then in both Stream A and Stream B, they are trying to attract people that are either enrolling in higher education or have completed higher education and to seek jobs in Canada. So they're trying to get their labor market running better and running again by attracting people with expertise from Hong Kong to their own countries.
Mm.
And
Yeah. So the final question is, how do you envision the future of Hong Kong then? So what are the kind of key obstacles that need to be overcome? And what are kind of like the goals for the next 20 to 30 years?
I feel like the future of Hong Kong really depends on how the politics in Hong Kong go and the
Mm.
relationship between China and Hong Kong, because a lot of changes in Hong Kong that we mentioned happened because of the protests, and that was also because China's trying to have a tighter grip in Hong Kong. So the
Mm.
thing is, now that people are leaving, if Hong Kong wants to invite them back, Hong Kong has to completely change. Hong Kong has to become more democratic. Hong Kong has to allow its citizens to vote for its chief executive. Hong Kong has to have a better education system that suits everyone's interests, even those that don't have conventional interests, such as people liking music, people liking art, people liking fashion designing. So the thing is, it really depends because now that I think about it, Hong Kong changed in 3 years. That's such a short time. That's a really short time. Of course, there are a lot of long-term issues leading to what Hong Kong is today, but the actual changes were just within 3 years.
Mm.
And the thing is, there's also the Chinese-Taiwanese tension going on. And if
Mm.
there was a Chinese-Taiwanese war, then Hong Kong would also be affected because Hong Kong is so close to both places.
Yeah.
And there really is no guessing what the Chinese government would do or what the Hong Kong government would do. So, so the thing is, like, I would say the key obstacles are politics and whether or not Hong Kong people still wish to remain in Hong Kong and to help build Hong Kong a better place.
Mm.
And there are so many possibilities that could happen. So I feel like for now, we can just see what's going on and try to better ourselves, try to learn more about Hong Kong, learn more about politics, learn more about history, and to wait for the moment where we can contribute to society in any way possible.
Mm. Yeah, of course. And I think the changes of any country really lie among the citizens, I guess, in the way they want to make change. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you once again, Lois, for joining in this episode and representing Hong Kong. This wraps this episode up of the Youth Factor. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you look forward to the next stop of our journey, Albania. Thank you very much.